Hey everyone. In this episode, Jose and I chat with Adam Stugard, a senior enlisted leader in the United States Air Force with a background in military intelligence who is currently an instructor of advanced leadership studies. During our talk, we discuss problem solving in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment. We learned a lot and we are sure you will too. Enjoy.
Life, learning, leadership, the Llama Lounge.
Welcome back to the Llama Lounge, a dialogue on life, learning, and leadership. Joe here, and I have with me my brother Jose. What's happening, bro?
Hey Joe, how you doing, brother? Doing well.
Good, man. Is anything change in your neck of the woods?
So we're talking about potentially going to what our base is deemed phase 2, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks, kind of thing. So we're just getting geared up for that. A lot of decon plans and making sure there's no more childcare issues when folks start coming in, because some of the resources we normally have are they're not as open as they normally are. So other than that, no, just looking forward to Memorial Day, spend some time with the fam, remember the reason why we're doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty cool, man. I'm taking a week of leave this week, just trying to start some projects, and the book we've been talking about pushing out one of these days. So I decided it'll happen one day, but I just thought we might as well just start writing. So, but cool, man. So hey, today we have a very special guest, man. We got Adam Stugard, an Air Force Senior Enlisted Leader that currently instructs advanced leadership studies at Maxwell Gunter Annex in Montgomery, Alabama, and has a background in military intelligence. What's up, Adam? How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you taking the time. The first time I met you through Heath Temple, and he kind of connected us, and you did an awesome professional development lesson for my senior NCOs. And I just thought, man, I need to have this guy on the podcast because, man, some of the stuff that you were talking about just kind of blew my mind. And I know a lot of my teammates were just really, really excited about having that lesson, and they appreciated it. And they told me how much they wanted to get those slides that you sent out, and and they got a lot out of it. So thank you for that.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I also appreciate you bringing me on for that. You got a really good group out there.
Yeah, definitely lucky. They're very open-minded, and they have a growth mindset, and I really appreciate that because just, I don't know, just putting in the work ethic and having a growth mindset will take a team very, very far.
Mm-hmm. It's tough sometimes even, once you're in for a while, you get institutionalized. Sometimes you get a little bit cynical. They did not seem cynical, like for a bunch of senior NCOs who are, stereotypically pretty, curmudgeonly. They were really open. They had some good questions, good discussion. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, awesome. So, hey, Adam, so, we like, whenever we have a guest on, we like to hear their story, because we hear it all the time. Every airman has a story, every person has an amazing story. And we want to know, like, hey, how did Adam get to who he is today? So we'd love to hear a little bit about your background and what you've seen and done, and maybe a little bit about your history.
Oh, sure. So I came in a little bit late. There was a big defining thing that kind of pushed me in. I tinkered with the idea of joining the Air Force out of high school and stuff, but I didn't end up doing it. Went to college for a little bit, didn't finish it up. And anyway, I was working for a couple banks and then an insurance company, and it was one of the big insurance companies down in Florida. And it was great. It was one of those companies you really like working for because all the benefits, they had like a gym on site, childcare on site, a cafeteria with a chef and stuff. And
nice.
You get time off. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it, but I didn't feel all that fulfilled doing it because it was a little bit robotic at times, a little bit monotonous and everything. But still, I enjoyed the people, and fundamentally I enjoyed helping the person on the other end of the line. But then I was working a late shift. I'd work 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. Because then I could meet up with my friends and drink afterward stuff. So I could,
Nice.
and then I could sleep off any ill effects from the drinking. So, you know, had my priorities.
That's good planning. That's very good planning.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Nothing wrong with that. I was going to go far, wasn't I? But then one morning, like early in the morning, my phone is ringing off the hook, and I think I am hungover that morning actually. So I stumble out of bed after like the 50th time it rings. I go out and pick it up, and it's one of my friends from work. He's like, "Dude, are you watching TV right now?" I'm like, "No, man, I'm sleeping." So he's like, "Dude, put on the TV. A plane just flew into the World Trade Center." So I put it on, and I see what's going on, and I just sat there watching, and you know, probably felt like anyone else who's watching the attacks on September 11th. But I was kind of numb, and so I really started thinking about, man, what am I doing? I enjoy my job. It's a great job, right? But I'm not doing anything anyone else couldn't be doing. And I'm certainly not doing anything to help. So, you know, I really did some soul searching, and I thought about it, and I said, you know, this attack makes me realize, you know, there's a bunch of people who are really angry with us and who don't make a distinction between, you know, a combatant and a non-combatant. It's all the same. And that means I'm at risk, and everybody I love is at risk. And if everyone I love is at risk, then I want to have some say in how this goes. And then I figured, well, if we were ever to have any chance of preventing this, how could we have done that? And I figured it probably would have had to have been in the intelligence realm. And not that, you know, Adam Stugard was going to rush in and save the day, but wanted to do something, right? So I talked with an Air Force recruiter, said I wanted to do intel and wanted to join, you know, as quickly as possible. Set me up, took all the tests and everything. I was in the delayed entry program like 2 weeks to the day, and just waiting to ship out. So so that's how I ended up in the Air Force and how I ended up doing intel. But I've stayed in the Air Force because I feel like I've never been in a place where I feel like I've had more of an effect on, you know, big things. And then the people I've worked with are incredible. It's the people that make it worth it, right? You guys know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I've been real fortunate, got stationed in a lot of fantastic assignments, got to do a lot of things within the world of intel. And I think by nature, I'm not, I like change. I don't like staying in one place too long, and I don't like doing the same thing for very long. So my job kind of fed into that. So I've really enjoyed it. I've stayed because of all that, you know. Got promoted, so I was really fortunate. And then one thing I've always wanted to do is, you know, teach professional military education at some level. And this is my last shot, you know.
Yeah.
So I jumped on it, and fortunately I got hired at the schoolhouse, so I can be an instructor for a little bit.
That's awesome. I mean, you know, you actually have a job that I want as well. And just, I already had an assignment moving out, but I even talked to Mike Wester about, you know, the position and stuff too when I was going through Chief Leadership course, and just thought it's such a cool thing. And yeah, we have a lot in common because PME is something that I definitely want to get in. I haven't had the opportunity to get, you know, to do it yet, and but it's something I'm super passionate about. So good on you.
Yeah.
So what assignments have you had? Where have you been?
I started off at Jack Molesworth. It's RAF Molesworth, so it's in the United Kingdom, about an hour's drive north of London. And it is the Joint Analysis Center, so it's the Joint Intelligence Center for the United States European Command. So it was a joint base, and I got to do targeting out there. So it was really, really interesting. After that, I went to Korea, to Osan for a year, and got to work. I worked the watch,
Oh yeah, you're in the AOC. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
In
That's
the
a very
watch.
cool room. Very cool room.
Yeah, definitely. And got to work some threat warning for the U2 missions when they would go up. But that was fantastic. You know, a year in Korea is like 2 years anywhere else, it seems like.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot. And after that, I got a great follow-on. I went back to the UK to RAF Mildenhall, and I got to work with the refuelers, the KC-135s. Deployed to Iraq, did some work in an tactical interrogation facility, and then went out to Creech after that to work with the MQ-1s, and got hired to be the resource advisor for the squadron as we were growing and splitting the squadron. That was an interesting story, but I'll skip that one for now. But the good thing about that, you know, I didn't want that job going in. I was happy to do it, you know, happy to do any job they asked me to do, but I was like, man, I'm here to do intel. I don't want to have to do the money stuff, but okay, you know, if that's what needs to be done, I'll do it. And I did my best at it, but the commander I worked for was phenomenal. He was great. He ended up being a wing commander before he retired, but he, you know, just doing a good turn, like keeping a positive mental attitude and making the best of any assignment you're given, any role that you're given, you know. I did that. And even though we were a little bit hurt for manning, when I was done with that RA job, I wanted to volunteer to be the command chief's exec out at the 432nd Wing. And I knew it was a big ask, but he supported me doing that. He was like, yeah, man, you definitely done your part. So I'll let you do that. And that's kind of an investment in me at the time, right? Because the squadron, we were standing up like a cap a month, like a combat air patrol every month. So another MQ-1 Predator line every month. So we were growing fast. And they could definitely use the hands, but I think he saw, you know, this will pay the Air Force back, and I've done my best to do that ever since. But after that job was great, you know, in terms of a developmental special duty, command chief exec, it's not one of the identified ones, but it's fantastic. So your scope goes from, you know, here's my lane as a staff sergeant or a tech sergeant to, whoa, here's like everything that's going on in the Air Force, you know?
Yeah.
So it was cool. And then after that, I went to Izmir, Turkey, which at the time was the NATO had 2 air component commands, one for the northern air and then one for the southern air. The southern air had Middle East, North Africa, the Mediterranean. And the headquarters for that was the 3-star command in Izmir, Turkey. So I got stationed out there, got to do some joint time. That was great. And then I went to CENTCOM Prime in Tampa at MacDill, and did 3 years there. And then went out to Hawaii, worked in the AOC in Hawaii for 2.5 years, made chief, and then took over one of the squadrons. And it was a SIGINT squadron. So it was a flavor of intel that I really hadn't done before. But it was very interesting, super smart people, like amazingly brilliant. They would talk about what they did and it would sail right over my head, but man, I'm so glad you're excited about what you do, because you lost me after the intro, you know?
Oh man. Well, that happens to me every time I talk to Intel guys. So probably at least 3 times when I'm talking to you, it's going to happen to me, but I appreciate what you do too, Adam.
Hey, thanks, man. And yeah, but that brings me here. And then I just arrived not that long ago. I finished up my basic instructor course about 4 days before all the lockdowns and everything. So I haven't instructed anything. So I can't even really call myself an instructor yet. But we're starting in a couple weeks of virtual in residence course. So it's some asynchronous learning. We're trying something new.
Jose, that's the one you're going to be in?
So I don't know. The notifications were supposed to come out, but I definitely didn't get a notification. And it looks like I'm like a number 2 priority on the list. Well, however that priority system works. So I don't know.
You'll probably be in the next one. If you haven't been alerted, I think they already built all the rosters and everything. So if you haven't gotten a notification, you'll probably be in the next one, which probably a decent chance will also be virtual, but who knows? This stuff evolves quick, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does.
I mean,
It does.
a lot of cool stuff that you just talked about, especially when you branched out to do the exec stuff. I know Jose had a big smile on his face because you know, we know like the amount of just the peripheral learning, and I've been using that term a lot, but you learn a lot of things when you're doing one thing, right? I mean, so you're doing a command chief exec, you're managing calendars, and you're doing all the stuff, but how many things are you learning about attention to detail, communication, coordination, and everything else that directly relates to leadership?
Yeah, and you end up running a lot of projects to ground, or like doing project management type duties on it, even if you're not the lead, right? You're keeping tabs because you're the touch point. Like the command chief is going to come to you first to ask you know, status of, you know, A, B, or C.
It was interesting when you were. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
When you were
go ahead.
you were talking about your history, just because very, very similar to me. I'm a crew chief by trade, but there was a point where I ended up becoming a group RA, and I got to tell you, the level of learning for that was insane. I mean, I remember looking at Chris, it was like, this looks like the Matrix. I had no idea what the ones and zeros were, right? And you're like, okay, well, somehow that's money. And then I had the opportunity to be a command chief exec too. So you're spot on, Joe. The aperture widens, and it just keeps getting wider and wider, because you never know who you're going to come in contact with. At some point, it was the chief of staff of the Air Force that came to the small little base, and we're like, well, okay, sir, let's hop on this, you know, and I'm going to brief you on something I didn't even know about 10 minutes ago, right? So it was an interesting job. Definitely get to learn.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, that the stuff that you're learning, whether like you said, doing the RA stuff or stepping out doing the command chief exec, and I think you start learning all these peer leadership skills, because it's not even peer leadership, but you're gonna have to wrangle all these chiefs around the installation, because you're working directly for the command chief, and you definitely start learning how to communicate tactfully, even though you're like, no, I really need you to do this. So very cool. So Adam, transitioning, so the lesson that you kind of taught, that you did teach my folks, is it was called Simple, Complicated, Complex, and it was all about problem solving. And I really thought, man, this is such a good thing, because especially right now in the environment that we're in, we really don't know what's going to be coming around the corner. Every day it's a new thing, and we really don't know what's going on. And I was thinking, could you kind of elaborate on some of that, starting off with maybe explaining what are the three categories or problems that I just kind of listed off, by kind of explaining them a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and they're good. It's good to know what you're dealing with, right? So if we're to go through the three different types, we'd start with simple. And by the way, all of what I'm talking about is in a great book by Rick Nason. It's called It's Not Complicated. And you can find it through online booksellers. I wasn't able to find it locally, but online I was able to get it. But he starts off by talking about simple problems. Simple problems, the thing is, you can define success. So you know what the outcome you want to be. You can define it, right? Also, you can reasonably know the factors. You may not be immediately aware of all the factors, but they'll become evident, and you'll be able to knock them out. You can also codify the process. You can turn it into a checklist or something like that. And that means that other people can come back, pick up that checklist or that, that SOP and follow it, and they should be able to reproduce the outcomes. But the thing about simple problems, by the way, complicated problems have those same factors. You can define success. You can know the factors. You can write it down, and people can produce the same outcomes by following those instructions. But the difference between simple and complicated is that simple, you don't need exactness in the factors that go into it, whereas complicated you do. You need precision. So the example he uses in the book is, did either of you guys make coffee today?
I did. I got a Keurig.
Oh, okay. Well,
did not.
Did either of you make a pot of coffee? How about that? Because Keurig's very, very easy.
Yeah, no, I didn't make a
No.
pot though.
Well, I did. I do it every morning. I make a pot because my wife and I share it.
Nice.
And so I'll fill up the water, put the water in, and then I get a filter, throw it in, and then I measure out each scoop, right? And I put in X number of scoops based on how much water, and then I hit the on button and it runs. But if I were to lose that scoop, I could probably eyeball how much coffee grounds I need to add, right? And I may not add enough, or I may add too much. And then I'm going to have either really weak coffee or really, really strong coffee. But either way, it's coffee. And that's a good example of a simple problem because the outcome is defined. You want to make coffee. The factors are known. You need water, you need a coffee pot, you need grounds, and you need a coffee filter, I guess, if you're fancy. And then that's about it. But it doesn't really matter how much coffee you have, or water, for that matter. So a complicated problem adds a degree of precision to that. So like if you were to do your taxes, we just did our taxes, right? Not that long ago. If you just ballparked your income or how much you had withheld throughout the year, you're not going to make any friends with the IRS, right? You probably
right.
And that's because you have to use precision with those things. So you may be an individual, like a single person on filing, and it's maybe pretty straightforward. Or you may have like tons of property. You may be a multinational conglomerate, and the accountant working for someone like that or something like that. And either way, you should be able to find out what the taxes were, right? What taxes were owed, what taxes were paid, and anybody else who is similarly trained to that task and has the rule book should be able to repeat it. So that's simple, that's complicated, right? The last category is the complex problems. And complex, you probably can't define success. You may define success, but you may find out that your definition of success was way off mark. There are many factors that are going into it, and you cannot possibly know them all. You also can't codify the process because you don't even know all the factors necessarily. And because of that, the outcomes are not reproducible. And there's a key component to complexity called emergence, and that's the unpredictability. And that's one of the big things that sets it apart from simple and complicated problems. So an example there is, if you were on a high stakes sales call, right? Or sales pitch to bring in a new client, high value client, right? You don't necessarily know what success is at the outcome. Like you may have a vision of success. You may say, all right, I want this guy to buy 1,000 units of this product and stuff. But maybe at the end of the pitch, he says, well, let's start off with 100 and we'll see where we go from there. Is that success? Or what if he gives you a maybe? You can probably define failure if he says no, but defining success is a little bit more difficult. And you don't know the magic combination of words, and even if there is one that's going to convince him to buy, right? He may be having a bad day. You may be, you may look like me, a middle-aged white guy, and he just doesn't like middle-aged white guys, and there's nothing you can really do about that, right? So there's complexity, and anytime you have that human dimension, complexity is going to be introduced. So those are kind of the overview of the three big categories.
Wow. I mean, there's a lot there. And I was just talking to some veteran transition folks, and, when you talk about complex, it's like we're constantly trying to create a metric on success of that program, but it's very complex. Like it's not just simple as if you got somebody a job when they transition out to Air Force. That's not a metric that says you're successful, because what if they hate their job or whatever, whatever it wasn't a really job that fits them, so there's so much more to that. And I think one of the problems is that we try to define it, right? And we're trying to make that complex problem maybe just complicated or simple. And something that I really appreciated what you had mentioned during the training was, while simple and complicated problems can be solved, complex problems can only be managed. Would you be able to kind of like maybe elaborate a little bit deeper on that?
Yeah, the big thing is there's probably not going to be an outcome. There's not a nice, tidy resolution to a complex problem, and for the most part. So you have to manage it. And what you mentioned there, with job placement for veterans is a good example, because it's something that is going to be ongoing, and there's no diagram for success, because the right job for me may not be the right job for you. And and even if it's the same line of work or something, it may be that the particular company isn't the right fit. I just don't fit in with the culture, or maybe the benefits aren't right for my family. So there's a lot of weird things going on. So you just kind of have to keep working to find the next best solution. So one of the strategies here is adopting a complexity mindset, and that's, hey, it's okay if I can't completely solve this. It's okay if there's a work left at the end of the day when I got to go home. It's probably not satisfying, and so that's why I think as human beings sometimes we rebel against that a little bit. But we have to be okay with that. So in the book, Rick Nason suggests adopting a try, learn, adapt approach to problem solving, and it's the same sort of thing that they're doing in Silicon Valley with lean startups and stuff. It's the fail fast plan, right? So you try something out, right? You come up with maybe a few COAs and try to pick the one that looks best to you, and then you implement it. And you're probably not going to feel real comfortable with it, because you are inherently working with not all the information, right? Because one of the things about complexity is you don't know all the factors. So you start off, you probably feel a little bit weird about it, but you press. And then along the way, you monitor, you seek feedback, you communicate with stakeholders and see how things are going. And there may be aspects that work, and there may be aspects that could probably work with a little bit of tweaking, and there are probably aspects that you need to kill. So you need to figure out some time to talk it over. Definitely don't want to do it in isolation. This is one of the areas where diversity really comes into play, and making sure you are not the only one making the decision, or at least if you're making the decision, you're not doing it in the bubble where you're not getting any sort of feedback. You know what I mean? And so some of the other aspects of that complexity mindset is that self-awareness piece. So you have to have some intellectual humility. Maybe I don't have the best idea. What role do I need to fill here? Maybe there is somebody who's a little bit more innovative, who I just need to empower. Am I prone to overreact or underreact to things? Am I prone to trying to jump in and solve things quickly? Am I too controlling? Do I need to let go? So those are definitely some questions you need to ask. Challenge assumptions in there, and that means ask questions. Even ask some stupid questions. There's a book I'm reading right now. It's called Range. It's really great. It's about being a generalist in an increasingly specialized world, but you can probably see how the topic flirts with a complexity mindset. You get a generalist outlook, and you're maybe not super deep on any particular thing, but you know a lot about a lot of things. So you can come up with possibly a lot of different solutions. Some of them will work, some of them weren't. But part of it is asking stupid questions, because as we learn, if we are being helped along, if we're getting hints, that learning doesn't stick. But we become a little bit more invested in the outcome when we take a stance, when we ask a question or give an answer that we think is correct, only to find out that it's wrong. You can probably think of a time when you thought you had something figured out, come to find out you didn't. And that failure is kind of seared into your mind. I remember there was a time where I was, I think I was in class, and I had to read out loud, right? And the word was facsimile, and I read it as facsimile because, if you're hooked on phonics, that's the way you'd pronounce it. And people were like, "Hey, dummy, it's facsimile." And now I can recount that decades and decades later because it was an embarrassment on my part, right? So yeah, ask stupid questions. Be comfortable being uncomfortable.
That is, that's so funny. I was just listening to an entrepreneur podcast, and I remember one of the things the guy said was, I like to be the dumbest person in the room. And because I want to find myself a room where everybody's smarter than me so I can learn, because that's the only way I'm going to get better. And I was like, man, who's ever said that before? Like, I want to be the dumbest guy in the room. But there's a lot of, it's not comfortable, right? People are talking over your head, but you just ask some what you would consider a stupid question maybe, and you're going to get some answers from that. And you keep trying over and over again. That's some great stuff right there.
True. And sometimes the stupid question you ask uncovers the assumption that everybody had, and it ends up challenging it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's why I like what you said about failing fast. How many opportunities do we skip because we don't want to fail, or we don't want to look stupid? How many questions do we not ask because of that? And if we get to the point, if I ask 10 stupid questions and they're all just literally maybe just seen as stupid questions, but then I ask that 11th one, it might get us to a next level, right? Because everyone's like, wait, what's that? Wait, nobody's thought about that before. Why are we doing it that way?
Yeah, exactly. That's a really common one, right? We've just always done it that way. And then you peel it back, and the probably good reason that created that process or that product may not exist anymore. And so now you're just doing it out of habit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, so Adam, I know we're kind of jumping around on some of the discussion points and some of the topics that we talked about, but I was wondering if you could kind of, because I learned about VUCA probably for the first time at Chief Leadership course, and I think a lot of people, don't hear that term very often. I was wondering if you could kind of educate us on what that term means, VUCA, VUCA, and what's a VUCA world?
Yeah, sure. That started out as a military term, but it's been adopted throughout business and throughout government and stuff. But VUCA is an acronym. It stands for, and it's broken down into volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that, if you think about those words, that's kind of the world we're living in right now. And I've heard it used in conversation, especially out in the Pacific. When I was at the Air Operations Center and we were in the midst of all the Korean missile launches and stuff, we kept talking about the VUCA nature of the world that we're in. But let me break those down. You got volatile, and that speaks to the nature, the speed, volume, and magnitude of change, and it's not in a predictable pattern. So if you guys remember Anchorman, like the first one, there's the news team fight, right?
Right.
And it starts off with a little bit of name calling, and then all of a sudden you got people launching, throwing hand grenades and shooting at each other. The trident. Then they get back to Ron Burgundy's office, and they're kicking back, drinking beer, nursing their wounds, and Ron has his feet up on the desk. And he's like, "Wow, that escalated quickly." That's the volatility, right? Who knew the world of news teams was so VUCA, right? The next letter is uncertain, right? So that means that it lacks predictability in the issues and the events. So with the COVID-19 stuff that's going on, they've there's a lot of countermeasures in there. There's a lot of things that we've tried, and we've kind of pushed some decision making down to local governments, state and city and county and stuff. But no one has the right formula yet. We're all just trying stuff, and we don't know if the actions that we're taking right now are going to progress in the linear way that we're hoping they will. Like, you look at the stimulus checks that we got, $1,200 or so for every adult and whatever it was. That was a lot of money. We don't know if that's going to work. We don't know if that's enough. Probably it's not, is what it's looking like now. It's been what, a month or so since they did that. And so that's part of the, try, learn, adapt, right? So got to keep going. They can't solve this. They just have to manage this. So that's kind of the uncertainty. Complex, that means just, there's numerous factors, kind of like what we talked about earlier. You don't know all the factors, and they interact in weird ways. So they adapt to each other. So it's a system of systems. And when we were talking during the professional development, I led off with the story of the Gordian knot, remember? Mm-hmm. And that was the mythical knot that was tied to an ox cart outside of the city of Gordius in the ancient world. And it had a prophecy that if anyone could undo this knot, they would be the rulers of Asia. But the knot was so intricate that, as you were able to loosen one area of it, other areas of the knot became more and more entangled and tighter. And so it was impossible. You just couldn't make any headway. And in that story, Alexander the Great comes through, right? And just takes out his sword, and he's like, it doesn't matter how this thing comes undone, as long as it comes undone. So he takes out his sword, cuts it in two, right? And I'm sure we wish we had, a quick fix to everything, but in reality, that's not the world we live in. But that knot has become kind of a symbol of complexity. And then the last one is ambiguous. That means there's a lack of clarity about the meaning of something. So we don't know. We're seeing signs, we're seeing indications, but what does that mean? And during the professional development session, we talked about, for a few weeks, we thought Kim Jong-un was dead. Right. Mm-hmm. There's tons of news reports, tons of memes about it. And we just didn't know. And every news report would come up with some new thread, some new angle to the story. Well, the leadership chain is out in Wonsan. So what does that mean? Do they have good hospitals out there? We heard that, China flew in a bunch of specialists to help them out. And no one really knew. There were people who were like firmly in no, he's dead. And they just don't know how they're going to proceed, right? And then there's other groups who are like, no, this happens all the time in North Korea. He's probably fine. He's at a resort enjoying life. But we didn't know. People looking at the same indicators were coming up with completely different assessments.
Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack too. And I kind of wonder, going back to how we were talking about the problem solving and the complexity of the issues and how you tied it to COVID and the experiences we're going through right now. I kind of feel like one of the reasons why people are so judgmental and irritated out there in the political sphere, right, in the news, is because everybody's thinks that this can be answered. Like, it's just, they don't realize it can only be managed. It can't be solved necessarily at this moment. Mm-hmm. And that's probably what's like creating all this extra angst, because most of us have not developed that complexity mindset that you're talking about. And it's a skill that we just kind of develop, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets very, very frustrating when you want a resolution. And this one, the COVID-19 stuff is a great example, because it's affecting all of us in many, many different ways, right? And all those factors are kind of playing into each other. There's like the ultimate thing is, some people want to reopen businesses and other people absolutely not, stay at home. But there's good and bad to both of those things. And and it's not all one way and it's not the other, but people want those neat, tidy answers. You know, if we just do this one thing, everything will be fine. We can go back to normal and lead our lives. And that's not the case. That's unrealistic. But with that imbalance in expectations, that's where frustration comes out. We're complicated thinkers at heart.
So Adam, like, please, I mean, dive a little more into that. I mean, so you said as humans, we are naturally inclined to be like complicated thinkers versus complex thinkers.
Yeah, it's, I think kind of our default mode, because there's two sides to it, right? There's the nature side, and then there's also kind of a nurture element to it. On the nature side, you know, we're a product of our personality and our experience. So as we come up, we think, you know, things that have worked in the past will work in the future. And hey, I know what I like, so other people should like this, right? But I think we know, like if you look at the golden rule, like do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's a complicated way to deal with people. And a lot of times it may be right, but I'll tell you, even with some of the people I care most about in this world, I will try to apply that rule and it won't go the way I think. You know, I'll do something that I would really appreciate, and I do it for, you know, someone I love, you know, my parents, my daughter, my wife, and it's just like, you know, okay, whatever, that's cool. Thanks for trying. I'm like, oh man, that would have been a home run for me. But yeah, it doesn't quite match. And then also solving problems is rewarding. You know, we get, you know, synapses in our brain firing, and the reward center is turned on when we're able to do it. You think about, you know, solving puzzles, or playing a video game and getting through like a very challenging level, which a lot of those are based on complicated elements. You know, there's a way to solve these things. But when you do it, especially if it's difficult, you feel a great sense of personal accomplishment, and that's rewarding. There's also hubris. You know, we think we can do anything, or we think we should be able to do anything. And if we can't do it, then we feel like we haven't measured up. But in reality, like sometimes we just aren't going to be able to solve things, and we have to be okay with that. And then I've said it before, but those tidy answers are just satisfying. You know, you go to the movies and you see a movie that doesn't really have an ending, and look at the comments on the reviews, you know, on Tomato. People don't like that. They want to know what happened. Give me resolution.
No. Yeah, 100% right. Like I still think like back on movies like the end of Inception. There's still times where I think to myself, what really happened, right?
Yeah, is he in the dream? What's going on?
Right. Yeah, so it's like our brain's trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, some things they don't easily resolve, you know? But beyond that, there's also the nurture side of it. So we've got the education system for years and years has been set up to, you know, have this teacher at the front of the room in a very pedagogical way, like feed us the information and then have us regurgitate responses. You know, they give us like the questions and then the answers, you know, and then we just try to repeat it. Even something as simple as multiple choice tests for things like, you know, history, like what was the cause of the Civil War, and what was the cause of the First World War, and, you know, why did the Great Depression happen? You know, what were the factors? And it's not any one particular thing, but, you know, a confluence of different events and societal trends and stuff that kind of built up to a point. And there may be like a catalyzing event, but there were a lot of things that happened. And that's the emergence part, really.
Right.
And then also, besides that, there's those societal success stories that we tell ourselves. You know, we saw the Industrial Revolution, you know, really ushered in, you know, to a great degree, like a working class, you know, and it brought us way forward in advances in science and mathematics and economics and stuff. We were able to cure diseases. You know, we don't have to worry about smallpox anymore, unless you're going to Korea, then you get your smallpox shot, right? And you know, for the most part, measles is non-existent. So is polio. So you have those things. That's great. And then the space age. You know, we were able to put a man on the moon. That's that's amazing. And with like 1960s technology, that's crazy. So we have these stories that say like, we can do anything. And that builds on that human, you know, hubris. Like, yeah, we should be able to do anything. Look at all this great stuff that we've done in the past, you know? But the world, you know, it's always been complex in ways, right? I mean, who knew in, you know, 1914 that the assassination of a minor, Eastern European monarch, or not monarch, but royal, would have set off a world war, you know, but the elements were just right. But now, today, it's not just that the world is increasingly VUCA, it's that like the speed of information and the speed of emergence is accelerated. You know, information is more widely dispersed and more quickly dispersed. So it just really adds, you know, jet fuel to the mix. And then, you know, we kind of get entrenched in the systems and the culture, and, you know, we've heard knowledge is power, but knowledge can be, you know, codified. We can write that down. You can ask Google, you know, and, you know, there's some studies that are saying even, you know, Google having all that knowledge at our fingertips has changed the way our brains work. But it's great because we can kind of outsource that stuff and then focus more on the complexity, the interactions, you know, the systems of systems.
So let me ask you, so this is a little bit from left field, but do you think that the reason why, I mean, or maybe it's, I don't know if it's chicken or the egg here, but when it comes to systems thinking, right? Systems 1 versus systems 2, do you think this is us trying to make the actual problem into something more simpler? Is just us trying to rationalize and try to make it so that we can get past the problem as quick as possible so that we can kind of move forward? You know, I mean, I might be way off here. It was just a thought that kind of passed through my head when you talked about systems.
Yeah, the system 1 and system 2 thinking, that plays into it, because system 1, like the cognitive heuristics, we take those mental shortcuts, right? And that's kind of the system 1, and that is largely a product of our personality and our experience as we've come up, and then we kind of learn like, hey, if this, then that, you know, and it's usually based on like short-term immediate responses that condition us, you know, and when we're taking those shortcuts, it does kind of steer us toward those easy answers, you know, especially if things similar to it have been easy. Like, you know, you look at a firefighter, right? You got firefighters in your squadron. If they walk into a building, like if they're very adept at you know, putting out house fires, right, they could walk in and probably assess the situation immediately and start making decisions based on, you know, where the flames are, what the flames are doing, the color, you know, the behavior, and they can make some decisions based on that. Now, if they walk into like a hangar or, you know, an office building or something like that, where the environment is different, right? They may have some of those same instincts, but they may mean something different in that new environment. So they may kind of go in with a complicated mindset, thinking like, okay, you know, if the flames are doing this, then I have to do this other thing, right? But it may not apply because the situation's a little bit different, you know?
Yeah.
But
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Cause I was thinking, cause when you talked about, like we make shortcuts. When you talked about, okay, if we define what the reasoning for a war is, super complex typically, right? It's not one thing that caused it, like you mentioned. You know, it's not, you know, the assassination of, you know, the prince, Franz Ferdinand, was that was him?
Yeah.
But, you know, yeah. So it's not just that. There's a lot of stuff that kind of worked up into it. But and when you talked about like even the Civil War, it's weird because people will talk about something like, oh no, it was all about slavery. It's like, okay, well, no, not necessarily, right? But then somebody will bring that up and it's like, no, it wasn't really about slavery. It was just about this. It was just about money. It was just about whatever. It's like, well, maybe you guys are both right. Maybe there's a lot of different things going on here. But like you kind of mentioned, we just kind of want to put a nice bow on it to make it simple, whether it's one way or another. It's like we're kind of like wired to try to do that, and I think it's just kind of us trying to rationalize it, and maybe, like you said, the hubris, right? Like we can figure this out. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So what would you say are some examples maybe where we took our complicated thinking and applied it to a complex problem, and maybe the results were varied?
Yeah, right. Well, sometimes we want to jump in and help. We want to jump in and solve, but if we don't correctly identify the type of problem that we're dealing with, and we start applying a complicated solution to a complex problem, some bad side effects can happen. And that's the emergence. And emergence, really, that, unpredictability, that can be positive or negative. But a lot of times if we start tinkering with stuff and tampering with it, we end up making it a little bit worse than we expected. There's a good story. It's known by the Cobra Effect, which automatically has like a cool branding to it, doesn't it? Yeah. But the Cobra Effect, it comes from a story from colonial India, where provincial governor said, you know what? There's a lot of cobras around here. They're biting a lot of people. This is a big problem. I don't like my folks dying. This is causing all sorts of issues. So we need to get rid of these cobras. Like, I think what we'll do is apply a bounty on cobras, and that'll solve it. We'll get all those people out there hunting cobras. We'll cut down the population easy. So what happened was, in the short term, there was a drop in the number of cobras and cobra sightings and bites and stuff like that, because people were going out into the fields and catching cobras, and they'd kill them, bring them into one of the government offices, and they'd get paid their bounty. But after a little while, the people who were trying to make a living doing this realized, like, hey man, I'm spending a lot of time just running around in the jungle or the fields trying to find cobras to catch, and some days I may not come up with any, and then what do I do for food? I'm trying to feed my family. Wouldn't it be easier if I just raised some cobras, and then when I needed a bounty or needed a little extra money, I could just kill a few and bring them in? So it gave rise to cobra farming in India. So we got the farmers like raising cobras, and but now they're not out like catching them or anything. So the numbers start trickling back up. So they start looking into it, and they're like, "What is going on here?" And word gets back, because secrets are not well kept, and the governor finds out, like, hey, people are farming these cobras, like. That's why you see this like weird disparity between, like, hey, we're paying a lot of bounties, so the numbers should be going down, but instead, like, they're going up or holding constant. So he's like, oh my gosh, they're farming them. This is ridiculous. Like, that's dangerous. No, we can't have this. So we got to eliminate that. All right, cut it off. Like, no more bounties for cobras. So the farmers hear the news and they're like, oh man, that sucks. I guess it was good while it lasted, but well, I guess I'll go and release all these cobras. So the numbers, go even higher. And that's a funny story, but that line of thinking has been applied over and over again. There's also the Hanoi Rat Massacre, which was basically the same story, except in provincial Vietnam, they had a problem with rats, and so they did the exact same thing and had the exact same result. And then even as recently as 2008, around Fort Benning, they had a lot of feral pigs. They had problems with feral pigs, so they put a bounty on feral pigs. And people were going out there, to hunt these pigs. But I guess they decided, like, hey, while we're out here, we might as well hole out and wait on like those trophy level hogs, and kill those. So what happened is like there's all this extra bait around because it increases interest in feral pig hunting, and but people they're letting some of the smaller ones go because they're waiting on the big one that can kind of kill two birds with one stone. And so that population increased as well because now there's extra bait lying around too.
Right.
So that's one of them. But then also, we've introduced species to environments to take care of one problem, and we've ended up like destroying an ecosystem. And an ecosystem is one of those inherently complex. It's, systems of systems, and they are all adapting to each other. So they're all changing based on what the other things are doing. So, in Australia, they had problems with a pest. I think it was a beetle that was attacking some of the corn, I believe. And so they brought over cane toads, or sugar cane or something. But they brought over the cane toads, and the cane toads just started reproducing like crazy and caused all sorts of problems and started eating some of the native wildlife and stuff. Even like, I don't know, have you been stationed in Hawaii?
I've not. I've only got to visit, but yeah, I've never got to be stationed there.
Well, when you visited, I'm not sure if you saw any, but there was a lot of like mongooses running around out there.
No, I never noticed that. Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. They're not native to Hawaii, but they were brought in because they wanted them to, they had a rat problem. So they're like, well, let's bring in the mongoose and introduce him, and he'll go around and kill all the rats. But it turns out rats are nocturnal and mongoose are diurnal. So they basically just work two different shifts, but they're kind of going after some of the same resources. They're both, scrounging and trash and stuff like that. So
wow.
Yeah, it didn't solve the problem, kind of just introduced another pest. And then in the business world, you've got Coca-Cola. A famous example, the one used actually in that book, It's Not Complicated, is they talk about when Coca-Cola changed the recipe and introduced new Coke. And man, they did their research. They invested a ton of money in blind taste tests. They were doing this. This was part of the Cola Wars of the 80s, but they were worried because Pepsi was starting to take some of their market share. And in blind taste tests, people were choosing Pepsi over Coke. So they came up with this new formula, and in blind taste tests, people chose new Coke over not just Pepsi, but also Coca-Cola Classic. And so they were like, oh, well, this is a no-brainer. Let's change the formula. We'll unroll it. We got this big marketing budget. And it fell flat, kind of like what we saw recently with COVID-19. There was a, kind of a feedback loop that was created with toilet paper. People started buying toilet paper for some reason, and then news agencies start covering that, like, hey, new toilet paper's out, better get your toilet paper. And so people run to the store and kind of feed on it, And so that happened with Coca-Cola too. And there was some news reports as people were hoarding the old Coke. And then some very, very vocal critics and of Coca-Cola, like changing the formula. Basically, what none of those taste tests could really capture was the emergence of it. And the emergence was, there's a lot of people who associate Coca-Cola Classic with, sitting at their grandparents' porch watching the 4th of July fireworks and feeling loved, and you can't account for that in a blind taste test. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The emotional ties to it, like, the complexity of human emotions for sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because you would think that all these, hindsight is 2020, right? You look back and you're like, why would you think you should do that? But really, it's almost like some of those decisions should have had some red teaming going on. Like, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea to bring this might occur, but especially introducing species, into a whole new ecosystem. It's like, have anybody in here thought that this might not be a good idea? But that's some great examples. But so with all this going on, and we kind of talked about some strategies earlier, to try to develop that complexity mindset. So what would you say are some tools for maybe managing complexity, since we can't necessarily solve them?
Yeah, some of the tools you can use, you brought up one just a second ago, the red teaming, and that goes along with planning. General Eisenhower used to say that, in war and basically in complexity, plans are useless, but planning, the act of planning, is priceless. And that's really true. So it just forces you, especially, you follow the joint planning process and stuff, you start, coming up with COAs, doing your SWOT analysis and stuff like that. You come up with some weird things that could happen, but at least you're thinking about them. And that helps eliminate some of that, negative emergence, and it can capitalize on some of the positive emergence that may come up. At least you've kind of thought through like some of the things that could happen. You'll probably still be surprised, but, and then red teaming, like you said, like just somebody playing devil's advocate. Like if 5 years from now, or however long from now, this is a complete disaster, let's write the story of how it went wrong, or having someone just working against you. Like, I'm going to do everything to undermine that plan of yours and pick it apart. So that's one thing. Another thing is to identify some of the key nodes and stakeholders. So a node would be, something that, a point where two things interact, right? So, like if you look at a community watch group, you've got the community watch organizers, and then working with police, and then kind of feeding back and forth between each other. Like the police provide them information. Like those are nodes, and then stakeholders. Identify the stakeholders of any situation, and then try to think of things from their perspective. And once you identify those key nodes and those stakeholders, you can start creating some causal loop diagrams and see if they're positive or negative, or kind of how they interact with each other. And that can also give you some idea of where problems may arise, or opportunities may present. And then another great way is to frame and reframe the issue. So there's a good thought experiment about, if you were the owner of like an upscale apartment building, right, in New York, so prime real estate, but it's old. It's an old building, and it's got an elevator that was installed in like the 40s. And your tenants start complaining about the elevator. Hey, it's way too slow. Like this is a no-go. Like you need to do something about that. You're the landlord, right? The complicated thinker would say, okay, I'm hearing from a lot of my customers that the elevator is too slow. So let's jump right into solution finding. Let's see, how much would it cost to install a new elevator? How much would it cost to replace the motor? Or, can I even install a second elevator? Like, what are the possibilities? None of those things are cheap, right? Those are all very expensive prospects. But if you kind of reframe the issue, like, why are they saying this? Is it because it takes too long, or are they bored and they're just tired of waiting? If you reframe the problem and to look at it as though, hey, the wait is too long, like it's annoying me, I feel like I'm wasting time, then maybe you do things that make the wait seem shorter, or give them something to do. So put up mirrors so they can, pick spinach from their teeth, or start playing some music, or, maybe even install like a small LCD screen that can run advertisements. And then you could even sell advertisements on the thing that gives them something to watch, so there's less expensive alternatives that may have the same end effect that what you're going for. And then that other book that I'm reading, Range, I'll hold that up here for you so you can take a look. Nice. But this was released last year, and it's great. It's a really fun read. But one of the things that this book focuses on is putting a generalist hat on in an increasingly specialized world. And so that's just experience weird and different things and think through like what you're doing. It's kind of a mindfulness thing too, right? Like think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because they've found like people who are really, really successful don't necessarily focus in one area. They've got a lot of different interests, and then they bring aspects of things they've learned from these very diverse experiences, and they put them together in new and interesting ways. And that's one of the ways also to get after complexity. It just helps build that complexity mindset.
And that's so interesting. And I've talked about this before, but like we had some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts, great guys on the podcast recently, and we were talking to them, and they were relating how, you know, learning how to get out of holds when you're on the ground with somebody on top of you is you can gain a lot of problem solving skills from that. Because just like anything, if you're starting to freak out because it's a person that has a hand on you or whatever, you're probably going to tap out immediately because you can't figure out the solution. Because, you know, when we're freaking out, or you know, we're just not going to probably be at a baseline where we can make the best decisions. And I was like, that is so true. How do I incorporate that with the leaders in my unit? You know what I mean? Like bring some Brazilian, you know, and maybe just kind of go through that and relate it to that, because I mean, that would transcend to so many different situations, right? Just the principles and the foundations of it. So that made me think about that, and the reframing the problems, like you mentioned. I think that is such a useful tool, because a lot of times we are solving the wrong problem, right? Mm-hmm. It's not really a problem, or like you said, the easy solution, or just a complicated solution to a complex problem is probably going to cost way too much money. You know, it's just there's no way, it's not going to be feasible to do that. So reframing problems, whether maybe it's like you could just move some people closer to each other instead of reorganizing something, you know, whatever it might be. Maybe it's a structural thing. So those are great problem solving skills. And I think it is great for leaders at all levels to start developing that complexity mindset, to understand that, for one thing, there's some things we can't solve, we can only manage, like you had mentioned. And then there's also sometimes where we can reframe the problem and come up with a solution that, you know, that we're solving a different problem, but it comes to the same end result where, you know, the customer's happy now, for whatever it might be. Yeah. So that's awesome.
You brought up a good one. Also with reframing, identifying those key nodes and the, not so much the stakeholders, but those key nodes, at least. Some of those things you can affect and some of those things you can't, but it helps you see, you know, hey, if there's like 100 different nodes that I've identified and I can only impact 10 of them, then, you know, maybe that's where you focus. You can keep an eye on those other areas, you know, to see if problems are popping up, but you know, kind of the levers that you have available to pull and push, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's awesome too. Yeah, because I remember when you started talking about reframing, I remember reading one of the books I read for my graduate degree was talk about reframing organizations and understanding that, you know, if it's a super complex problem, you probably got to look through multiple frames before you can get to the, you know, the best solution for it. Because, you know, it may be a cultural thing, maybe a political thing, a structural thing, or what have it. You know, it might just be a human resource issue, but you can't just look through one and expect that you're going to solve the entire thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and that's a good plug for diversity in the room too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting those diverse perspectives and to see it from different vantage points. Yeah, I don't know how many times I've talked to somebody and they told me they saw something this way. I'm like, wow, we're perched on two very different vantage points, because I didn't see it that way, and I really appreciate that view, but I didn't see that at all. So, diversity thing is such a huge thing. But man, so Adam, man, I really appreciate you taking the time. This is, to me, is one of the most important lessons, because, you know, as a leader, you start seeing your developing leaders kind of moving on, and we're all developing, of course, but you get to see some of the folks getting some experience. And this is an area where I think there's a gap. People start, because we keep on, we talk about, hey, what got you here will keep you here. Well, not really. Like maybe complicated thinking got you to where you're at, but now you got to start thinking a little bit differently, because the higher you go in the organization and the more people that you lead, typically the less complicated problems you get and the more complex problems you get, to the point where every problem you get there's not a great solution to it. And I think understanding that, the complex mindset is a great thing that we should all kind of continue to shape. So I really appreciate your time.
Oh, sure, man. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, we wrap up these things what we call a leadership rapid fire, right? So what we're going to do is just ask you 4 questions, and clearly there's no wrong answer there. It's just your perspective and what it means to you. But I'm going to shoot out 4 questions for you, and if you don't mind answering them.
Sure, yeah.
All right, ready? Question 1. What is your favorite leadership trait?
Oh, that would have to be trust, and it's trust on both ends. So I want to have trust in a leader, but I also want a leader who trusts me, empowers, and gives me a certain degree of autonomy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sweet. All right. Question number 2. What is your favorite quote?
That's a good question. Recently, the the one that keeps sticking in my mind is that one that I think I said earlier from, I think the philosopher's name was Eric Heller, but it was from, quoted in the book, It's Not Complicated, but it's, in a complex world or a changing world, the learned man or the learning man will reign supreme. The learned man is perfectly able to operate in a world that no longer exists, so it's built in that complexity mindset. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of goes in line with what I was saying. I was like, yeah, what got you here probably won't keep you here anymore. You got to keep learning and getting better and understanding things.
Keep branching out, do those weird different things and bring it into your tool set. Like a lot of skills, transfer between different domains.
Yeah. All right. 3rd question. What would be the number 1 book you would recommend to an aspiring leader?
Gosh, that's a great question too. I don't know if I would recommend just one. It would depend on the person, because I've recommended different books to different people, but Start With Why is a good one, Simon Sinek.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably a good introduction.
Okay, awesome. All right, and then the final question, this one's always the deep one. So at the Llama Lounge, we're about life learning and leadership. So the question is, how do you keep your harmony between life learning and leadership?
I probably don't do it all that well. I've, honestly, one of the things that has come out of the COVID-19 stuff is I've spent a lot more time at home, and during the day throughout the week, just telework. And, but being able to spend more time with my wife and my daughter has been fantastic. We've been able to become a tighter family unit, and it's great. I never want this to end, but I feel a lot of guilt in saying that, because there had been some positives for me personally with this, but this has overall been like the gravity of the situation and what people are going through is not lost on me either,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of us are in the same boat. Like, it's a very strange time and to feel a certain way. So, but, one of the good things about this, silver linings that came from this is it gave me an opportunity to meet you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to not only deliver some professional development to my senior non-commissioned officers, but also to come on here and share some of your perspectives. I think they're so valuable. And I think a lot of folks will get a lot from just understanding the different types of problems that we could face. And, and sometimes we can't solve every single one. And we just got to figure out, like you said, the levers that we might want to pull and also maybe just adapt entirely different mindsets to be able to manage those. So thank you so much.
Oh, sure, man. It's been a pleasure. And it's been a pleasure getting to know you as well.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hopefully we can do this again sometime. Maybe we can have you come on and talk about a different lesson, and then come on and we'll elaborate a little bit more on the podcast. Because, like I said, when you came to talk to us at the professional development course via Zoom with my senior NCOs, that was 20 something people. But hopefully we have some more people listen to this and get some of this goodness. So once again, thank you. Really appreciate it. And to all our listeners, thank you for taking the time to tune in. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and llamas are out. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the show. We'd love for you to connect with us at www.llama-leadership.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/Llama Leadership, and also on Instagram at Llama Leaders. And a big thanks to Mike Whitmer for the music. To check out more of this stuff, go to soundcloud.com/Mike-Whitmer. Thanks again. See you on the next episode.